and we are ready to go. All right, we'll just start with the questions again because we had a lot of good questions this time. All right, let's just jump into it. Talking probably about a wide range of topics today, but question number one, just starting out, is what do we think about the loophole for logical reasoning, or loophole in logical reasoning? What are your thoughts on that book?
I like it. I don't recommend really any of the books out there that I've seen. I've read most of them. I haven't read the whole thing of that one. I've read parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. It's pretty in depth on various English topics and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think for most people it's too in depth. Like for most people, like a lot of the parts that I read, for most people, it might be a slightly like a waste of time, like to go that in depth. But overall, I like the book. I mean, it's
Yeah.
if you're going to use books to study for the LSAT, get that one. I would say
it's not my first rec. If someone's looking for a book, I still lean toward Powerschool or LSAT Trainer usually. What I found with Loophole, and again, I had it for a bit. I read a few chapters, just listening to people's experience that have been tutoring with me a little bit. It's usually either you really like it, you really super resonated with it, or it's just not working at all kind of thing. And that's primarily because just the way she teaches, it's not completely, but it's very, very different from how even Powerschool, LSAT Trainer, Fox, anything, it's very alternative in that sense. And so it's much more about structure and grammar, and there's a lot of, different methods, powerful, improvable, and it's gimmicky and acronym-like in a way. And so that really resonates with some people's line of thinking, but not for others. And so if I was answering this question straightforward, I probably want to know a little bit more about the person and how they learn. If you get the book, you're probably going to get something good out of it, no matter what. Whether that's a standalone LR source, I'm not 100% confident that that's going to be the end all for logical reasoning, though. So
I would, and I've already said something about my view, but just to sort of contrast, I have a little bit of a different perspective than you. I think you're saying something like, well, it's a lot different than the PowerScore stuff, and whatever. I think that's what makes it good. I think that it is different, and you need something different, because I think a lot of those things, just the PowerScore and everything, even though the PowerScore is the best of the stuff out there, I think doesn't work for a lot of people. I mean, you see a lot of people just struggling for a long time with logical reasoning and the LSAT in general. Loopholes, of course, only about logical reasoning. It doesn't talk about games or reading too much. I like it for that reason. I would recommend more broadly, like if you're having trouble with logical reasoning, get it. I mean, if you're going to do self-study, you know what I mean? But I don't recommend self-study. I think the LSAT's too important to not have put everything that you can into it. But some people can't afford to do anything other than self-study or whatever. And so I would recommend it for those people.
Love it. Yeah, I don't even know. I know PowerScore is an industry standard. I definitely agree with you. Well, maybe I disagree with you. I don't know if it's the best, to be honest, out there. It's usually not my first recommendation.
PowerScore?
Yeah, it's not usually my first. It's usually the only time I really recommend PowerScore is a lot of it depends on how much time they have to study before their first test, because 3 monster books you're getting to get through. Right. And if the person does not resonate with dense or very theoretical conversation, it's not going to be a winner at all, because that's what PowerScore is.
That's true. I mean, what I mean when I say it's the best is, I mean, like, if you wanted to get to 160, 165, I don't know of any other book that would be better for you.
I agree with that.
But yeah, it might not be the fastest way to get to 150 or 155.
I agree. No, I mean, I agree with that too. The other books, I don't think either they're lacking in sections like Loophole, or they're just not comprehensive enough. They're more just broad overviews of everything. And so, cool. Okay. And so that kind of knocks off that. Okay. So yeah, I mean, June test is coming up Sunday or Monday. So what do people do in the final days before the exam to maximize their time? How do they use their time wisely? Do they study more? Do they study less? What do they do? What are your thoughts?
Hmm.
Depends on the person, obviously, but
Yeah, it depends on the person. The main goal, I guess the main goal, so the LSAT is a lot of material and stuff to learn. And if you think you're going to increase your score significantly in 1 or 2 days, I think you're wrong. And mostly, I mean, if you were capable of doing that, you would have done that for the last 10 sets of 1 or 2 days. You would have done that for the last month, the last 2 months. And you probably didn't if you're asking like what can I do in the last couple of days, it's probably because you haven't made the significant improvements that you want to make yet. And so if you haven't done
sure.
that, yet, you're probably not going to do it in the last couple of days. And so what I would say the most important thing is to avoid like a catastrophe brought on in part by anxiety and stuff like this. And
Sure.
so I would say try to relax as much as possible and, do stuff, but, you know, don't expect too much. Don't expect improvement. Don't expect perfection,
Yeah.
if, but, you know, obviously it's like, well, are you telling people to do nothing in their last critical days? Sort of, I
Well,
mean,
what if I frame it like this? Because I agree with you. I mean, 1 or 2 days or 3 or 4 days, you're not going to get big gains. Probably not any gains. So what do you tell someone that if someone's scoring, let's just go for the big score. If someone's scoring a 170 flat, right? But it's iffy. Like, okay, sometimes 168, sometimes 171. It's like it could really go either way. What should they do mentally so they feel confident and just mentally prepared a few days out? Because they're probably freaking out right now.
sure. Well, if you're getting a pretty good score already, or no matter what score you're getting, I guess the thing to do would be to try to avoid catastrophic drops. And one thing that could cause that is anxiety, which I started talking about. But another thing which could cause that is like having no idea what they're talking about on a reading comp passage or no
Yeah.
idea how to do a certain logic game. So I guess focus on those sections because you're not going to, at least you could maybe you could learn something that prevents a catastrophe.
Sure. Yeah.
You're not really going to learn much of anything that's going to like ensure that you get another point or two. I don't think.
Yeah. A lot of discussions I have point towards that. If someone's borderline on a score, they're like it's iffy sometimes. Then a lot of the conversations I have is the confidence, but it's primarily going to be in logic games because of what if they give you a curveball. What if they give you a triple layering game? You're not super comfortable with that, or whatever it may be. Like so, then ways you can combat that. Well, of course, you can explore miscellaneous or just more complicated or complex games toward the back half and just kind of feel okay with them, and just that might help your confidence a little bit. But then, yeah, I mean, you're going to have to draw confidence on the actual test. Like, know that, yes, you've done a game similar to this before. It's one little extra thing, but you can totally handle it. I know it's not registering with like your index of methods and steps, but like, it's not far off. It's one little thing. Just think about it conceptually, intuitively. Okay, they're just adding another little variable here. I can just draw it to the side. It's one more thing for me to manage, but that's doable. I just follow my strategy still. And you're like, if they do that, and if you kind of just present it calm like that, they're literally fine. Like it's not bad at all. So a lot of it is in that mental, in my opinion, a lot of it is in that mental. Just yeah, you learn the test so mechanically sometimes, which is okay. But then if they give one little curveball, does that throw off your system or not?
Right. And yeah, you want to make sure that as much as possible that the system that you're using is comprehensive. And
Right.
so anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Cool.
think that's good.
Love it. Probably the densest question. How do you incorporate the psychology of learning into your methodologies?
Yeah. Are you a psychologist?
No.
Me,
I
me,
studied psychology a little bit, but I'm
okay.
nowhere near full-fledged
Yeah.
psychologist.
The psychology of learning is probably something that you can get a PhD in. I don't have one. I know the psychology of learning. What I know about psychology of learning, I know from personal experience and
Sure.
teaching and or informal teaching or stuff like that. And you know, I don't know what the principles of the psychology of learning are or whatever.
Right.
But what I know about the psychology of learning I mean, if I just start listing things that I know that, you know, you should learn things in a, one thing we were just talking about. I'm not that I don't know if this is the psychology of learning or more like the like efficient ways to learn, but like you
Yeah.
should learn things in a systematic way so that you can deal with variation in a comprehensive way, in a like way that you understand the fundamentals. Um, I mean, I know that, you know, obviously repetition helps in learning. I know that practice helps. I know that error correction helps. You know, there's all kinds of things. I don't know. It's almost too broad to address, but I don't know. What do you have? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, I don't even know that the psychology of learn. I mean, again, I'm not that much in the depth in psychology. But you know, in terms of efficient learning methods, I agree. You know, step by step, and then also, you know, kind of ties back into the book discussion a little bit. I really don't want to make the test more complicated than it has to be. And so I mean, you have to learn theory, of course, and that's great. But if I can simplify something, or maybe, you know, say, well, this question stem is really closely related to this one, so you can kind of view them through similar lenses, or just, you know, when you explain things, use regular words,
Right.
normal human conversation, so people can understand what you're saying, because you don't have to understand it on this, so like biconditional, then contrapose it, then do all this stuff. It's like, no, just like these two things go together. And so if they're both in, they're both together. If they're both out, they're both out together, because they have to go together. And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
that makes
that reminds me of that conversation you, or mostly me, was having on the Facebook page recently about sufficient conditions and all this stuff.
oh
And
yeah,
yeah, it's like I don't even really teach it that way. You know, where like, oh, this word indicates sufficient conditions. It's like, no, understand the fundamental idea of what sufficiency and necessity means, because they do use the words on the LSAT.
of course.
So you can understand the words, but mostly you got to understand the concepts and be able. And I like diagramming. I think, I'm not sure if you like diagramming for the LR, but I like diagramming. So you got to be able to diagram it properly, but to memorize all these like different, you know, this word means this and that word
Sure.
means this. There's like thousands of these things. So I
Mhm.
don't think that's a very efficient way to do it.
I mean,
And
in terms of diagramming, I mean, again, it's one of those things where like I want people to know how to do it, because if you need to do it, like you need to know how to do it, because otherwise you're probably not going to get it correct. But I rather that not be your primary way. If you can think of it in a more
oh
just
yeah, yeah.
plain English way, you know, that's gonna be it's gonna help you, honestly. So I like the theory, it's great. But and I will teach it, of course, but it's not always my go-to. If I don't have to use it, if I don't have to diagram, I don't want to. I'd rather do it mentally, because it saves me time. And I don't know if this is psychological either, to kind of finish the question. You know, and we've talked about this before, but the whole emotional aspect, right? How can you teach it in a way that's either, you know, realistic or positive, or just, and how do those reinforcements slash punishments um, affect people's motivation to keep learning, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to end with too. I mean, a big part of the psychology of learning is the emotional aspect, like that you
Hmm.
can't learn if you're constantly, you know, down on yourself or whatever. You're not going to be focused on what you're supposed
Yeah,
to be doing, stuff like that.
exactly. And so I hope that kind of answers the question. I don't really, I'm not a psych expert, but
Mhm.
it's a good discussion though. So, all right. This is an interesting question. So part of the question is just, what's the best approach for people that are new to studying? We've kind of already touched on that. Well, you touched on it a little bit, but then on top of that, it's three questions in one. So you can kind of just take it as you will. What's the best approach for people that are new to studying? At what point should you seek a tutor if you need one? And then what are the best study resources? Which is a loaded question, but um, I'll just let you drive on that one first.
Sure. Um, so a lot of tutors say, and I think you say this to people that, and there's obviously some reason behind it, some legitimate position,
Hmm.
like get a tutor after you've like learned as much as you can from the books and whatever,
Hmm.
because, you know, obviously then theoretically you spend less time with the tutor, and that saves you money, and, you know, you do as much as you can
Sure.
by yourself first, And so that's good. And that's probably the best way for some people, especially if they can't afford much tutoring or, whatever.
Yeah.
But for me, I've always found that it's much easier for me to work with a student who hasn't been learning from books and stuff first, that I have to undo a lot of stuff that people learn on their own in order to get them to the score that they want. And
Sure.
so I'd say reach out to a tutor ASAP as soon as you're ready to start studying. And as for the other questions, like what's the best way to start? Well, like I'm sort of
Yeah.
saying, get a tutor
Hmm.
and start learning it properly and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean, so well, again, and with all these questions, depends on the person, but largely, and you're correct, a large time I don't recommend people automatically start with a tutor most of the time. Sometimes I will, but sometimes I won't. For a few reasons, just because, there is outside of LSAT world, there's the money and the time thing. Um, and honestly, like straight up, if the Power Score book can teach you about conditional reasoning and you can sit down for 2 days and grapple it out, that might honestly be more efficient than us sitting down for an hour and me trying to cram that into an hour, or me trying to, whatever topic it is, right? It's possible it's more efficient sometimes. On top of that, a lot of those conversations for me are with people's finances, like, well, what's your budget like? What are you thinking? How far away is your test? That kind of thing. And so a lot of times I will throw a self-study book out there, or, at least if I don't want them to learn a certain methodology or any of the self-study books, I might just throw my own resources out there and say, hey, go ahead and just read this for a month, or try these out, follow the study plan for about a month. And then that way, when we start our sessions, they're going to be pretty efficient because you are going to have specific questions. The whole unlearning thing too. Um, I don't have a whole lot of issues with that unless it's Kaplan, to be honest. That's the big one. But besides that, in my experience, if people are coming from Loophole or PowerScore or Trainer or whatever it is, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, well, don't use that because it's bad. I'm saying, okay, well, have that on the sidelines as an alternative strategy or in your tool belt, but also be willing to look at it this way and just have both in your brain. So like sometimes you might want to view a sufficient assumption through this lens, but then other times you can view it through this way because they taught it this way, and that's not technically wrong, but it's weird. And so I'm more about, because that's the way I self-study too. I use PowerScore, but then I also listen to Thinking LSAT. I did the LSAT trainer. I watched some YouTube videos. And I was just really pulling what I could that I liked personally from each resource. And so me personally, I like having multiple resources. So when she asks, what's the best approach? Part of my answer is, yeah, I mean, use a tutor. It's always gonna be helpful, but then, be flexible. No one particular method is absolutely perfect. And even if it is perfect, like your brain may not register with it that way. And so have variety, be able to attack the same problem in different ways to get to the solution.
yeah, I should say also that I self-studied. I can't
Yes.
remember if it was 1 month, 4 months. I think it was like 1 or 2 months. I used PowerScore Bibles only,
Hmm.
uh, and just my own analysis of them and the test questions and stuff.
Sure.
That was my only resource. I just remember being in my apartment like 10 hours a day just doing this stuff.
Right.
And, uh, and I got a 171.
Yeah.
Um, so it's possible to get a very high score with just self-study
Hmm.
for some people. But a lot of I think it's not useful. I've seen so many people not be able to do that, that it's clear that there are differences between people to me that, certain people can do it with PowerScore books. Certain people cannot do it with PowerScore books. And so, if you have a history of being the person or whatever that can do things that other people can't do in terms of intellectual academic kind of stuff, then maybe self-study. But even then, I mean, I got a 171, but there's higher I could have gone and faster I could have gone if I
Sure.
had a tutor, and more scholarship money to be had, better law schools. I went to WashU with $90,000 scholarship.
Yeah.
Um, but I could go to somewhere else with a $90,000 scholarship. That's, I don't know, I think WashU's 15 or 18 or something,
It's like a
maybe
school.
10 or whatever. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. It depends on your personality and whatever, whether it matters or not, and your goals. But yeah, I just think that, while it's possible to do well with certain things for some people, I think that pretty much everybody would benefit from reaching out to a tutor. I mean, I constantly talk to people for 30 minutes or so who never end up working with me, just to help them out, just to point them in the right direction. So, just reach out to a tutor for
Exactly.
that,
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like you have to tutor with people. Like, you don't need to actually sit on a session. Like, even like a lot of times, and I'm sure you're the same. If someone messages me and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling on sufficient assumptions. How do you approach them?" Like, I'll sit down and talk with them. Like, it's not a big deal. And that's not a big deal at all. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you get people that say, "Oh, I use Powerschool and I went from 140 to 170," or I did this method, I went from 140 to 170, whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, that works for you. Does that mean that it's going to work for the general population? Probably not most of the time,
Mhm.
because just everyone's different. So that's why even recommending anything is finicky, because just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else.
Sure. One thing also that I think people don't understand, like if you're getting I think it's a 160, I think you're doing better than 80% of the people.
It's true.
Like if you picture yourself in a room with like 9 other people, there's the 10 of you there. If you get a 160, you're basically the best person there. There's one other person that might be better than
Yeah.
you. So like 160 is very unordinary, non-ordinary. It's not normal. It's And so if you expect that you're going to do normal things and get an abnormal score, well, you better have a lot of confidence that you are abnormal, because the things you're doing are normal. Uh, you're probably normal too, and you're probably going to get a normal score like 150 or something like that. And we're not even talking about 170 yet. That's like in a room of 100 people, you and a couple other people did better than.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think people don't really understand the percentiles, or not as much as they can and they should. And I was just telling someone the other day on the Facebook group, I think they told me they were going for 170 or something. I was like, make sure you understand how unreasonable that is, or
Right.
how unique that is, because unless you are very confident that you can do the same thing as everybody else and get way better results, that's, you need to be, considering
Of course,
either
psychologically, people have
doing something much different and much more thorough or whatever, or lowering your goals. I
but it
mean,
becomes finicky because, well, there's two things that play into that. Having that, because I've had that conversation before with people. You have to approach it in a way of two things. Is one, of course, and this is true of most people, overconfidence, right? Like, oh, I mean, yeah, they can't do it, but I'm me. Like, I got this. Like, I can
right,
totally do it. And it's like, you're probably not actually. I mean, now that becomes the second part of the conversation, though. It's not to say that you can't get a 170. That's not the point, because I really think a lot of people can get that score if they do everything properly and they have enough time, assuming those variables aren't really clashing or anything. But your expectation to get a 170, if you're at a 140 and you want a 170 in 3 months, just could you maybe do it? Yeah, you could be the anomaly, but just be aware. I'm not saying you can't do it, but be aware that's extremely rare, and so your chances are lower. Just be mentally prepared for that, and then we can carry that conversation forward. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
finicky.
yeah. I think a lot of people could get a 170, but when and by doing what?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the big thing.
Not quickly by doing what everybody else who's not getting a 170 is doing.
Right,
That's not
exactly.
gonna work.
Exactly. Best
Yeah.
practices for sure. So good, man. That's a good discussion. All right. Just two actually, oh wow, this whole thing may just be questions. That's fine though. How do you review RC? Do you read old sections that you've taken before? Is that any value? Is that valuable, or is it always new stuff? Um, yeah.
I don't imagine that I would be redoing any RC packages. There's just so many. I
Sure.
mean, and it seems to be because you're going more in depth in a subject in an RC passage, you'd probably remember some stuff about it. I think it would distort
Hmm.
the results. You could redo it, but there's 4 per test, there's 90 tests, there's, so there's like 400 or whatever that is, passages. That'll take quite a while if you're doing 10 minutes per passage or whatever, just to,
Sure. Yeah.
and that's going to take, I don't know on the math on that. You can do somebody.
It's a long time. That's the point. Yeah.
That's a lot of reading. I don't think there's any real need to do them over. I guess if you've done 100 and you had one that really gave you trouble, you could go back and do it and see if you learned anything. And once you don't remember it anymore,
Sure.
whatever, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't really redo too much. In terms of review, I would figure out why, like you say, the evidence is in the passage that you're wrong, and it's right there. They said the right answer basically, and they didn't say the wrong answer. And figure out what kinds of things you're missing reliably. I had a student once who basically every time that the passage would say, like it would be a passage about a particular individual, and every time the passage would say that individual was unique among his peers for the time, every question that relied on that information, he would get wrong because he would never remember that. I guess his brain just said, that's not important. It's not important that he was unique. But it was important. In multiple passages in a row, they asked about that. And so, you can notice the things that you're sort of not paying attention to, or, need to be paying attention to more. And sometimes you're not answering a question wrong because you didn't understand the passage, but maybe you didn't read the question properly. The reading comp it's not as formulaic in the types of questions it asks. I mean, there's a lot of information in the questions, so you got to be paying attention to the questions carefully. You got to be seeing like what was the patterns between the wrong answers that you're picking. Like, are they too specific? Are they too general? Are they too this? Are they too that? There's patterns. It's not just one thing. Probably there's probably 100 different patterns. That if you learn 20 of them, then your score will go up a point reliably or something.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm reviewing RC with people or discussing it, it's purely a lack of evidence. It's like, okay, I'm picking A. Like they'll say, okay, Brad, I picked A, but the answer is C. I'm like, okay, well, prove A to me. Show me where they say A, and then it's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, well then don't pick it next time. Now it's not as blunt as that, but it's like that's really what it comes down to. Like if I'm reviewing RC, it's like, okay, well, picked A, answer C. All right, so first things first. I thought it was A. Let me figure out why I can't support that, why I thought I could, but why I can't. You kind of make that realization. Okay, the answer is C, and this is where it becomes in your part too. It's like, okay, the answer is C. I found the evidence for it. It's literally right here. Why did I miss that the first time? Was I rushing through the question? Did I not understand what C was saying? Was it I didn't think that part was important? But those are the kind of questions you want to be asking yourself. With everything, it's a lot more active and a lot more of a headache to do that, but it's worth it being active like that and asking yourself those important questions, because you can actually draw a takeaway from the question, like, oh, I didn't think that was important, or I misread it, so I need to be a little bit slower on this part, or whatever it is. Do that a million times and you'll get better, It's basically that, and that teaches you to just become a more careful reader. It teaches you in reading comp and in logical reasoning, nothing is unimportant until you get through the entire question or the entire set. You may not remember all the details, but you should if you don't remember all of them, take the time and go back and find them. I know it's a time test, but if you try to skimp out on this question, you're probably not going to get it right. So that's kind of a balance too.
Pretty much always on the outset, just to piggyback on that, like going faster leads to worse results. Like you have, like if you're going faster because you have less time, you're going to get more wrong than if you just had stayed slow and doing what you do and then just guess on the ones that you didn't get to.
That's hard mentally for a lot of people to do. I feel like the instinct or like just the instinctual responses. If I can do more, I'm going to get better. But it's like, no, like literally if you only do 60 out of the 100 questions and someone finishes the test, you could still score higher than them, Right. It's not about how many you do, it's how many you get correct. And so if you can only get the 3 passages on reading comp in your test tomorrow, don't try to do the 4th one. Like just do 3 and make sure you get them right. And you're probably going to come out mathematically and statistically, you're going to come out higher than you would if you try to skimp and do that fourth passage, because now you're going to get half of the ones you were going to get wrong now. And so yeah,
Right.
that balance between timing and especially on reading comp, your speed is definitely going to come organically over time. That is no easy fix. But I mean, you can get faster, but it just, you need to make sure you allot the time. You definitely can't underestimate how difficult reading comprehension can be.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest section to teach. But I'm teaching somebody right now who, I think like a couple weeks ago, they spent 45 minutes reading a passage and then got pretty much everything right, doing what, slowly what I told them to do and stuff. And then yesterday spent 5 minutes reading the similar passage, and they got almost everything right on it. So you can improve pretty quickly. I mean, that went over the course of a couple of weeks, and I'd say I didn't have that person take a full section ever, and now she has. But I would say she went from probably a score of like 8 on reading comp to like 13, 14 in a week or 2 weeks, something like that. We were doing logical
Yeah.
reasoning,
Which,
partly, maybe like a week. So, you can improve, but
oh, for sure. Yeah.
you need to. It's
The-
really important to get a good tutor for reading comp, because like it's very complicated to teach well.
It is, and it's very important you practice it. I tell a lot of people, like, I mean, even if reading comp is not your main thing you're studying today, at least do one passage. Like, I mean, I just think the consistency of practicing it over and over again, that helps a lot, And so
People just like don't want to practice reading comp
oh,
oftentimes.
neither do I. I mean, I hate it. It's so annoying.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
It's my favorite section because I learn stuff sometimes when I read the passages.
Sure.
But whereas logic games, I don't care how do you organize,
Yeah, I know.
Susie on her bus or whatever. But yeah, I think it's because it's most complicated, then people just don't want to do it, and then that makes them just get worse.
I was the exact same way when I was studying. I put it off a little bit, barely. I mean, I still studied a lot, but the month before my test, I knew I had to do it, but I was just not about it. I did not want to sit down and do it. It took you should be really disciplined. If you don't like reading comp, if you like it, then that's awesome. I'm happy for you. But so yeah, good. Okay, so next question. 3 people actually asked this question independently. Working full time and studying for the LSAT. How do you do that? How do you manage that? Do you quit your job? Some people do that. Do you not quit your job? If you cannot quit your job, of course, which you should not quit your job probably, but if you don't, how do you manage that schedule? How do you manage that time?
Yeah, I wasn't working when I studied. I was doing full time. I was doing 10 hours a day or so of studying.
Yeah.
I was just eating, studying, exercising a little bit, whatever.
Sure.
But I didn't take 6 months either. I took like a month or 2 or something like that. So it was just like intense. So, if I was doing 10, maybe 12 hours a day, who knows? Because I wasn't really doing much else, and I was awake. I was only sleeping 8 hours, so I must have
right.
been studying a lot. So, I mean, it's sort of like a time management thing. I don't know what to tell people about this often. It's just like, I don't know, can you make 30 minutes in your day? If so, do it and do it, But I mean, one thing, I don't know if it's super related to answering the question, but commuting for a job is like such a hassle. I think people don't realize how bad it is. It's like, well, it's only 30 minutes each way, It's like an hour of your day. You're only awake 16 hours. That's like almost a tenth of your day gone, and you already had 8 hours of that day gone. So you already had, so now you're like 60% of the day gone, and you still got to deal with this other stuff, showering and cooking and this and that and whatever. And maybe you have kids and maybe you have a relationship and you have all this other stuff. Like if you can set your life up so that you don't have to commute, that would be a good thing. Probably worth like tens of thousands of dollars, or you shorten your commute or something like that. Now, I don't know if you can do that on the fly when you decide to study for the LSAT, but maybe you can plan that ahead of time. But if you can't plan it ahead of time, you're in it right now. You got to study right now. Well, I mean, everybody always thinks they have to study right now. You could always just take the test later. That's acceptable.
Yeah. I mean,
You
that's what
know,
I kind of say. I mean,
anyway,
I did not. I mean, so I was a full-time student when I was studying, which is not the same. It's not as large of a time commitment as being a full-time 9 to 5er. You have a little bit more flexibility when you're in college. So I mean, I did like, 2 to 3 hours a day sometimes just an hour, depending on the schedule, that kind of thing. But if you're working 9 to 5 or whatever that your time frame is, I mean, yeah, I mean, a lot of times you have your job. You can't necessarily just change your commute or just flip your job around like that. Sometimes you can, but most times you can't. And so if you have kids, family, other obligations, understandable. I just say, listen, just get on a calendar, get on a schedule, and budget 30 minutes, budget an hour a day on Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, maybe just try to do 2 or 3, and just try to kind of offset it a little bit. Um, and then on top of that, I mean, I think a lot of people go into this feeling like, okay, well, I have all this other life stuff going on, and they feel super guilty because they can't study 4 hours a day. And so I have that conversation a lot where it's like, listen, you're doing the best you can, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that. And I mean, even if you only study, if you take a day off, if you study 30 minutes a day, like I know some people claim they are studying for 12 hours a day, and their diagnostic was a 170, all this kind of stuff. But it's like, take that with a grain of salt, because a lot of people actually aren't, even though they say they are. And honestly, like, I don't want you coming home from 9 to 5 and studying for 4 hours after that, because that's just not going to be efficient. Like, there's no way that you can sustain that long term. And so it's just like, you have to just kind of take the cards you're dealt with, basically. And, this is how it is, and it's fine. But you can be smart about it. When you do study for that 30 minutes or an hour, make sure it's really undistracted. Make sure you're focused, really budget that time. And then, planning wise, just maybe you don't take your LSAT in 3 months. Maybe you take it in 5 or 6. Give yourself a little bit more leeway to kind of get to that goal you're trying to strive to. Because it might take a little bit longer, because, yeah, frankly, you are studying less. And so it might take you longer to progress that in that way.
Yeah. Also, the thought comes to mind, if you're asking, how am I going to make time for this? Probably you don't have time for it. So whatever plan that you had about how you have to do it by August or whatever, don't do that. People
Right.
have done, thousands of people before you have tried to do that, and it doesn't work.
Right.
You might not know that, but here we are to tell you that we've seen it happen time and time again. People are saying, but I got to do it by August, but you can't. But I got it, but you can't. Okay, go for it. And then you will fail, and you won't do it by August anyway. So, be realistic. But people, it's sort of like how people always expect that they're going to show up on time to something. And they're never early. They expect they're going to be there on time, and they're always late, and they're never early. Like, why is that? Because there's all these things that can go wrong, and you don't think about all of them. And there has to be a very specific set of things that happens for it to go right.
Right.
And
Exactly.
like, it's never gonna go that way. And so, yeah, you can imagine, without taking into account all the variables and the possibilities and everything, that you could do it by August. But you're gonna be late,
Yeah.
and I mean, of course, some people do set a deadline and then meet the deadline. But like, if you're the kind of person, or if you have the kind of life, I should say, that you're asking, how am I gonna make time? Probably realistically, you're not. And so come to terms with that, accept that. Because if you could make time, you wouldn't be asking how I'm going to make time, you'd just be doing it.
Sure.
If you're asking how I'm going to make time, there's probably an indication that you can't make time. And you're like, what am I going to do? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to let go of the need to take it in August. You're going to take it in January.
Right.
And, so that's one way to address
Yeah.
that
I
question.
mean, and that's all correct. And just that, like, you're gonna have to you're probably gonna have to shift around if you absolutely must take it in August, or if you absolutely, you can only delay it by a month, you can't delay it by 3 months. It has to be either August, September, or August, October, for whatever reason that may be. It's like, okay, well then this has to kind of be priority one. You're gonna be making some sacrifices, as much as you can. Like, yeah, you might not see. I mean, I don't have kids, but you might not see your kids as much, or I don't know what it is like, but it's unfortunately, the test is weighted too heavily in this process. Like, you really, like, don't want to skimp, like, shortchange yourself. Like you really don't, because it's gonna have short term, or I mean, doesn't matter. It's gonna be relevant in your law school decision and how much money you get, which is gonna impact your financials, which is probably gonna impact your stress long term and all that kind of stuff. So this is kind of a really big deal. And so, I mean, I get you need to take it by August because that's gonna help you, but like really sit down and think about this, because this is a lot bigger of a life decision than you're probably aware, and that's, you don't have to be aware of it, but just really take all that into consideration, because you really should not shortchange this thing. I mean, you don't have to go to 175. It's a 160 is not going to, make your life any less important or less awesome. But, really make sure you are really clear on what this score will have in terms of, or how the score will impact your application, and how that affects your future and how that affects your life in the long term. And so, I don't always love that it's weighted that heavily, but that's the reality. And so, that's what we have to work with. And so, yeah, it's a tricky conversation sometimes, but it's important for sure to make them aware of that, because there are a lot of pros and cons to taking in 3 months versus taking in 6 months and that kind of thing. So, and for me, it seems like it's worth it. I mean, if you have to study 3 more months, I get that sucks and that's annoying, but like, it's probably worth it in the long run if it means you get 10 points higher on your LSAT, so, yes. Awesome. Okay. So the one I definitely want to hit is, how do you pick a personal statement topic? Kind of getting away from the test for a second. How do you pick a personal statement topic? What do you, it's, of course.
Well, when I'm helping somebody with a personal statement, I do a whole interview in which we touch on many aspects of their life, and I pick it based on, I guess you could say, intuition. I don't really do a whole analysis like, oh, we could do this with it. It just seems like, oh, that's the story well, here's a couple of good options. I'd like this one. What am I basing that on? I mean, I guess what is an emotionally compelling story? What is a revealing story about good personality characteristics, or what is relatable, or what is shocking, or what is extraordinary, or there's like a bunch of different factors. But I guess if you're doing it on your own, just sort of consider everything at first. Like, brainstorming starts with just throwing out all the ideas of what are the possibilities here. And then you want to pick one that's, like meets some of those criteria that I was saying. Like you don't want somebody to read your personal statement and say, oh my God, how can I get through this thing? Or, oh, just like everybody else that I just saw, or something like that, so, or even worse, like, what the hell is wrong with this person? Or, something like that. So you want to be pretty positive about yourself. You don't go into all the mistakes you made in your whole life, and, or like almost, or just like, hey, a bunch of bad things happened to me, or something like that. I mean, you can go into challenges in your life, but the focus should be on how you overcame them, what you did, how, great you were in doing X, Y, and Z, or, without bragging too much, just saying, this is what I did, whatever. And I don't know if that helps people, but that's,
well, yeah, I mean, and it's an interesting thing, because I mean, for this question, answering this question, how do you pick a personal statement topic? I mean, listen, it's like you have multiple topics, and so you've had multiple, high impact situations in your life, or you've had multiple tragedies or positive, whatever it is, right? Which one? I mean, you don't want to be, when you're making a personal statement, you do not want it to be a sprinkle of everything. Like I don't want to read about 5 different things happening. I want to read about one and why that's important to you, right? So honestly, it's hard to fake writing sometimes, and so whatever one is most genuine to you, it doesn't even have to be the biggest event. Just whatever one that you really is deep within your heart, the most big impact in your life, just pick that one. That being said, this is the tricky conversation, because unfortunately, and I'm sure you're in the situation too, you get a lot of the same thing.
over with different people.
with different people, different high impact stories, which is fine. So, like, you know, for instance, for me, a lot of the pro statements I've read, you know, quite a few over the years, but the biggest topics I get are immigration. That's a big one. I get a lot of sexual assault, unfortunately, and a lot of domestic abuse. Um, those, I mean, no, there are some other heavy hitters too, but those are the big three I really read about all the time. And so, and tell me your thoughts on this, because it's kind of a tricky conversation, because if that is your reason, then you should write about it. But the challenge becomes, to be honest, they're about to read a lot of immigration stories. They're about to read a lot of assault cases. Like, so how is yours going to be different from everyone else's that unfortunately are going through the same circumstances?
Yeah. Well, um, so I really think that nobody is really going through the same circumstances as anybody else.
Okay,
But it can seem that way if you don't delve deeply enough into it.
gotcha. Okay, yes.
So, which is sort of like how to answer that question you asked, like, how do you distinguish yourself? Go deeper. Like, what is
There you go.
specifically going
Yep.
on in your life?
Yep.
And talk about the specifics. And if you're going to talk about all the specifics, definitely do not talk about multiple things, because you don't have time to do all that. I mean, your thing's going to be 10 pages. You know, to talk about the specifics of one thing takes a couple pages,
Hmm.
and you're done and
Right.
stop.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Because yeah, because it's not enough. And you kind of said this before I even asked the question, but like, it's really not enough to say, okay, well, I came to this country from another country, and so my life is hard, and that's it. Like, no, like, I mean, and I'm not doubting that it is, but it's like, I need specifics, right? And so you need to be very detailed, like, when did it happen, or, you know, how did that really impact you? Like, how did it make you feel? What challenges came about that? What did you do specifically to face that adversity? You have to go, the personal statement has to be very deep and not as wide, you know. I'm sure you want them to know about every single aspect of your life, but and that's the challenge. Like, how do you pick just one? It's which one can you write most genuinely and most deeply and thoroughly and most passionately about, and that's what you should pick. um
also, by the way, uh, in terms of learning to write, a lot of that
Ooh.
happens during law school. Um, Law school, it's not, yeah, well, it's not always that lawyers are the best writers, but very often, I mean, if you're talking about PR people or people writing laws or statements or whatever, they're often lawyers, because that's sort of where you learn to write, is law school. And
Yeah.
so you are not going to be able, probably since you're not in law school and you've never been to law school, to produce this very in-depth, specific, powerful thing, piece of writing by yourself. So you should, I mean, if you are able to, it's going to take a lot of drafts. Uh,
Sure.
and so like I remember writing stuff when I was in high school, and both my parents are lawyers, and I would give stuff, you know, writing for my school stuff, even in college. I would give it to my dad to read, and he'd be like, "This is trash." I'd be like, "What? I thought it was really good." You know, I mean,
Right.
he wouldn't say it's trash, but like
Right. Yeah, yeah,
that's how I would feel when he gave me his feedback. I was like, "What do you mean this is trash? He just said everything's wrong," you know. And now I look back and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was trash,"
yeah.
you know, like when you're in law school and then maybe even out of law school, learning to write professionally, as lawyers do normally, um, that's, or often, that's when you will know how to write. And so you don't, even if you think what you're writing now is good, it's probably not that good. So definitely be open to feedback from, especially from people who have been, who are lawyers, who are academics, who are, you know, people who are writing who are reviewing, who are writing your recommendations or whatever. If they send it to you, if you send it to them and they say, I think this needs some changes, it probably does. So
Right.
do look for people that you can get help from,
Honest
that are
feedback.
professionals, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just go into, I mean, in this kind of what you're talking about is like, you know, like you spend all this effort and thought producing a work that you came from yourself, and then someone just says, well, this is okay, you know. that can be emotionally frustrating sometimes. And so yeah, just know that like that's why but just know that's gonna be the process, and you want to get someone that will be honest with you, not say, oh well, this is great, I love this, and like you're gonna be ready to go. Like no, like have someone tear it apart, because it's gonna suck in the moment, but it's gonna become an awesome document. And when it does, it's only there to help you, and so
Also, personal statement writing is a good opportunity to like sort of think about yourself and your life and what you want to
yeah,
do and who you are and your relationships with others. And so I've put some time into it and make sure that not only it's good for the purposes of admission, that's the main focus, but when you do get it that way, you will probably learn some things about yourself that will be helpful in your
for
personal
sure,
life, you know.
100%. All right. Last one for today is going to be because this is a common question I get a lot. How do you overcome 35-minute anxiety? I'm doing so well. The question is supposing, I'm doing really good untimed, or, not at 35 minutes. But once I add the timer, I'm done, So is that just a kind of an organic process that will happen over time? Do you do anything actively to do that? Like what
Well,
do you
so maybe
do?
to the issue that I think we've been saying that we're going to talk about, but we haven't yet, I don't think, which is, maybe we did, I don't know, about like
It's
whether we should time ourselves constantly or,
or
all this.
not.
Because like one of the problems is that so I say, always be timing yourself, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Literally say that. I mean, I literally do say that to people,
You do say that, yeah.
people on Facebook, but like, I don't say, there's never a time, I do have times when I don't ask them to time themselves, but pretty much I say, time yourself. To my students, time yourself unless I tell you otherwise.
Right.
On every problem you do individually. And so one of the reasons I say that is because you can believe that you're doing things very well because you're not doing it time, you're getting the right answers, and then you get to a section and you're like, oh, I didn't get to like 15 of the questions. Maybe I did get the first 10 right, but
Right.
that's not for a high score. And so the things that you thought were adequate, they might be adequate and maybe you've been faster, or they may be too
Right.
adequate and you never realized it because you never tried to make them faster because you weren't even timing yourself. And you might now be realizing after have spent like 6 months learning these things that they're not actually fast enough to do realistically.
Right.
So
Um,
yeah, anyway, that's one.
no, I agree. And what's
So
that?
like one part of it is it might not be anxiety. It might be you literally don't know how to do it fast enough. And so it's
Right.
not just, you don't know
Yeah.
how.
I mean, in my experience, that's the same issue. If you look at my comments on what I tell people, I say untimed a lot. So it's kind of different for you, right? And to address the concern, like, well, how do I know, like, if I'm doing untimed, how do I know if it's actually going to work fast? Well, what I've found is I recommend untimed because I want people to actually be able to practice. Okay, here's how you're gonna do strength and question. And it's gonna be fast, but you have to learn it slowly first. You actually can compartmentalize and actually understand what you're doing in the first place. Because if I go right from learning to 60 miles an hour, like it's gonna be hard to just practice that application when there's a time pressure going on. So one thing I say is start on time so you can learn those strategies, right? But then the problem, not the problem, but the thing that I have to be careful of is I'll teach people on time and they go right to a 35-minute section, right? And that's the issue because that's not going to work either, right? You can't go straight from untimed to 35 minutes. So what I do is say, okay, yeah, you're going to learn untimed in the beginning. The minute you start getting right though, like you have, if it's a full section, for instance, you have 50 minutes to do a section and just make sure you can do that and feel okay with it. Okay. Then you have 45, then you have 30, then you have, and then you bring it down gradually like that. So, I want them to get it first. And maybe that's just because of the background, being musician first. When you learn anything in music, you start as slow as you need to make sure you're doing it correctly. And you don't get faster until you do it correctly first, right? And so if I try to, and it's not exactly the same thing, but if I try to start doing something at tempo, I'm going to suck at it. Like, it's not going to happen. You have to start slow and build it up. And so that's how I've kind of applied that to this. And it will work as long as you don't jump from that untimed to 35 minutes. Because
Sure.
that does not work.
The analogy to music, unless I'm wrong, sort of breaks down, because when I'm saying to time yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying to do it at tempo. I'm not saying to do it
You're
fast.
not. No.
Time yourself. Do it slow, but
Right.
time yourself. And that's part of my answer of how you're going to get over the anxiety, if the anxiety is the issue. Expose yourself to anxiety and get comfortable doing it at the pace that you're normally going to go at, even though the time's running.
Right. So really, I mean, looking at it now, there's really not a huge, massive difference between our two theories on timing, because we're both saying don't start at 35 minutes. So the only difference is that you're saying start with how much time you need, just always have a clock going. And I'm just saying, well, honestly, in the beginning, I don't mind if there's not a clock. Just the minute you start getting it and feel good about it on time, just put like a very generous amount of time on the clock and just deal with it then. That seems the only difference.
I could say something more like what you're saying, but I find it's like much quicker and more efficient. Just say time yourself every single time, unless I tell you otherwise.
Sure. Yeah. And I just say do on time. And the minute you start getting 5 out of 5, just let me know and we'll put a timer on it. So it's almost the same thing, really.
Yeah. If you give people leeway, they'll be like, well, I didn't time myself here at all but it's like, no, just time yourself every time. Like,
right. Exactly. So I think we can definitely agree though, starting at 35 minutes is not going to be the case. You really need to start at some sort of generous amount of time. And would you agree that the goal is to just slowly bring it down over time as you get better and better, more comfortable with it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But that's also, I tell people who I'm not tutoring or who are self-studying to do the timing, because I'm not confident that their learning process that are going to get faster. I think
that's true too.
And I want them to know that they're not getting faster a month in, not 4 months
right.
in.
True. I mean, yes. And then, so if I detect that someone's not learning a strategy that is not going to be adequate for long term, I don't even say do it time. I just say, just don't do the strategy at all. I say, listen, like historically, this is not producing results. And so you may want to consider just like this, like right now, this is working great for you, but you actually put in the test, it's not going to happen. Right. And so it depends. I think if I'm correct, I feel like, based on the conversation, you have a much more narrow thought or narrow mindset on what is good and what's not good.
Yeah.
Versus I tend to be a little bit more open, like, okay, yeah, you can use Powerschool, it's going to be good enough for, you to start out with, but where you're more like, honestly, no, this is not going to get you there. So just don't even use it.
Yeah.
With some flexibility on either end, of course.
Yeah.
So it kind of just depends.
Sort of like people, it's sort of like related to this. I don't know a lot of people are like constantly talking about learning styles, like, oh, I'm this kind of learner, whatever. Like I've read articles, reputable publications that said that stuff's all a myth. There's no such thing as a learning style.
Yeah.
And sort of what I think, I don't think that people are like, there's no such thing as a breathing style, really. I mean, people all breathe the same way. People all talk the same way. They all walk the same way. We're human beings. We do human being stuff. And how we learn is human being ways. And nobody's really a visual learner, audio learner. That doesn't make any sense. We're all visual. We're all both. We're all pretty much visual. We have a very highly developed visual system. We make information. There's a reason that almost every animal alive has eyes. It's like a very good way to.
Right. Yeah.
And humans have some of the best eyes, if I'm not wrong. Like maybe hawks are better, but like humans have like very good eyes. We're visual creatures. But the stuff on the LSAT is, I mean, it's visual because like you're reading it, but it's not like pictures or anything. But we're still visual. That means you got to like imagine what you're thinking.
Sure.
And so anyway, yeah, I think there's right ways to do it, wrong ways to do it. Can the wrong ways work? For some people, yeah. I would consider Powerschool wrong, but I got a 171 doing it. So,
Yeah. So it's like, what's the definition of wrong and right then, you know?
so, but, but I also don't think because I did it the wrong way that the wrong way will work for you. No, it won't work for you.
That's
There's a lot of different, like we were saying in the personal statement. There's a lot of differences between people, even people that look the same. No, we have totally different upbringings, education, whatever. Both my
right.
parents were law school. I'm gonna get stuff just that you might not have gotten, and you're gonna get certain things that you're gonna be way better than me. I don't know any other languages. You do, right?
Right.
Or you know how to play the drums, or you know how to do this. I don't know any of that stuff
Right.
because we weren't musicians, or whoever,
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
we had. There empirically, statistically, if you look at everybody who's doing the self-studying, whatever, you just look at the Facebook group, people just go on and go on and go on and go on without getting their score months after months after months, years sometimes. I've taught students who have been working before they work with me for literally for years trying to crack the LSAT.
I know.
And so, I say there are wrong ways, and I want to make sure as much as possible that you can detect when you're doing a wrong way. And part of that is timing yourself always.
Exactly. Good, man. Well, good discussion. But those are some good thoughts for people to kind of weigh and everything. So awesome. Well, we'll hit some more of these questions later down the road. And when we find more stuff to kind of talk about, we'll just hit it again.
Yep. All
All
right.
right, man. I'll chat with you. Have a good one.
Yep.
Bye.